Hi, welcome to Motive Manipulation Methods. In this series of videos, I just wanted to share just a little bit about how I write music. And a lot of how I write is just messing around with motives. Things like transposing, reharmonizing, augmenting, inverting, things like that. And so hopefully what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a set of videos where in each one we'll just talk about one of these methods. I'll try and explain it the best I can, and then we'll try and practice it by writing a sketch or two using that technique. Before we begin talking about how to manipulate a motive, it's probably important to define what exactly is a motive. Now, this isn't the dictionary definition. Also, I've realized this is like the 20th time I've recorded this in like 3 months. And all this time I've been saying motive. And I'm pretty sure you're supposed to say motif because it's Motif, not Motive. But it's fine. I'll try and get it right, but I probably won't. Anyways, a motif is a musical idea that is unique. And because it's unique, it's memorable. Now, how can you tell if a musical idea is unique and memorable? There are three identities that a motive can have: a melodic identity, a rhythmic identity, and a harmonic identity. A melodic identity is established by a combination of steps, skips, and leaps that occur in a specific order. A rhythmic identity is established by a combination of various rhythmic values that occur in a specific order. And a harmonic identity, and you can probably guess what I'm going to say by now, is established by a combination of various harmonies or chords, I guess, in a specific order. Now, having these identities makes the musical idea stick out and make an impression on the listener. And a good motive will have at least two of these identities. Two, because when you manipulate a motive, you're essentially removing or distorting or manipulating one of those identities. And the remaining unchanged identity is what allows the listener to understand the connection back to the original motive without it sounding completely foreign after you manipulate the motive. So let's go into a little deeper on what these three identities are. So let's start with melodic identity. So here's a little 7 note melodic idea. There's no rhythmic interest. It's just straight eighth notes, so it doesn't have rhythmic identity, but the focus is melodic identity. So melodic identity is defined by something that has a series of steps, skips, or and leaps in a specific order. And it usually has a combination of them, right? Because if it's just steps, it's a scale. So that's boring. If it's just skips, that's just or leaps, it's just an arpeggiation. And that's also not very unique, right? It's common. So it needs to have a combination of them. So let's see what this one has. It's got a second up, another second up, a fourth up, a seventh down, a second up, and a second up. So it has a combination of them, right? I'll write it out real quick. So M2, M2, P4, M7, M2, M2, right? It's also not in one direction. It goes up, 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 down, up, up. So it has a unique contour to it, and a unique shape in direction of the melodic idea. For now, it doesn't really matter whether it's a major second up or a minor second up. What matters is that it's a second up or a fourth up or a seventh down. Because what we can do is if we move this up so that it's on F, and this is a method we'll talk about called diatonic transposition. Now it's the first one is a major second up instead of a minor second up, so it doesn't really matter. But if you listen to this, it still pretty much sounds the same. So let's listen to these two together. And right. So if you heard this, you'd think, hey, this is just the original thing that I heard before. Now, it also doesn't matter if you altered some of the pitches. So now let's hear all three versions. Even though this has now changed it that the E to be an E flat, you can still tell where it came from because it keeps the same series of intervals in the contour. Um, say we did this. Now it might be harder to tell where this came from. right? So that's why for melodic identity, what matters is not necessarily the notes you use, but the intervals created by the notes you use. Now let's talk about rhythmic identity. We have a rhythmic idea. Now we can ask, does it have a variety of rhythmic values? Well, we start with a dotted eighth and 16th, going to an eighth, and we also have a dotted quarter tied over to a quarter, and then we have the dotted eighth and 16th again, and then finally ending on a dotted quarter, dotted half, sorry. So we do have a variety of rhythms, and it's not too simple because if it was just this, bum ba-dum 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 ba-dum, that would be too simple, too common, and so it'd be hard to distinguish it as being a unique idea. So what makes this unique is the fact that it's this bum ba-dum ba-dum tied over to a different rhythmic idea. Two smaller rhythmic ideas combined to create a unique rhythmic idea. And actually, if you look at it, what makes this rhythmic idea so good is that it's technically one rhythmic idea copied over because this part here is essentially just this, right? So bum ba dum. But now this is a bit boring, so we make it more interesting by adding this figure that shifts the accent on the upbeat instead of the downbeat. And by doing it twice like this and keeping something the same, we're doing repetition. And repetition really drills into the listener like, hey, this is important, you should remember it. And that's something we always should keep in mind. We'll talk more about this when we're talking about how to create a melody, but something to keep in mind. Also, this rhythm is not too simple, but it's also not too complex, right? If it was longer or it used 30-second notes and quintuplets inside of sextuplets, inside of septuplets, inside of a. Anyways, you get the point, right? Then it gets too complex for anyone to really catch on to it, right? If it was bum ba da ba da ba da ba 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 dip, at that point, it's just Morse code. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to remember. So it's simple enough that it's memorable, but complex enough that it's unique. Now, this is just a idea with a rhythmic identity, and this one was just an idea with a melodic identity. And we said a good motive has at least two identities. Well, what would happen if we combined these two ideas? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this over, and I'm going to copy the notes just for reference here. All right, so let's use these as reference notes. That's E, F, G, C, and then D, E stays the same, and then F. Let's hear what this sounds like. Sound familiar? It's Indiana Jones, or the Raiders theme from Indiana Jones. At least a fragment of it. But now you see, like, this becomes memorable. This is a very memorable motive because it has two identities. And if you extract one, you can still tell where it came from because the other one remains. Now that you heard this, if we heard this, you know where it came from because it keeps the melodic identity, even though the rhythmic identity is now gone. And if you heard this, you can tell where that came from because even though it lost its melodic identity, it kept its rhythmic identity. Your brain was still able to be like, hey, that's where it came from. And some of you may already caught on earlier when I was doing it because one of those identities stuck out to you and your mind might have filled in the other one. Anyways, the point is now we can do something interesting. So what if we take this, copied it over, and we shifted it up by a third? So that was a diatonic transposition of a minor third because E is now G. And we're going to do a bit more alterations. We're going to change this to F, and we're going to move this. So the last note ends on a C, and we're going to change this with rhythm up like that. Now let's hear what this sounds like. And it's the full Raiders theme. So if you look at it, it's the it's the motive, just copy paste it over and altered slightly. So what do we alter, and how does it tie into the identities we talked about? So contour stays the same. Contour meaning the general direction of the notes, right? So up, 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 and then down, up, down, up, and then we added some extra notes, but we won't worry about that. Actually, let's do this. Now let's look at the specific intervals. Of course, we got second up, second up, second up, second up, and then we got fourth up and diminished fourth or augmented fourth. No, sorry, diminished fifth or augmented fourth up. So that's different. And then a sixth down instead of a seventh down, but then steps up, two steps up. So it generally stays the same with some slight alterations. But notice how we made a lot of melodic alterations, or we changed up the melodic identity slightly. But you still know that where it came from because the rhythmic identity stays exactly the same. Of course, disregarding those two last notes, but right? Bum ba dum, still bum ba dum, right? So now when you hear the entire melody, it's memorable because it's the same idea repeated twice. So it's easier to remember, right? It's unique enough with a lot of varying leaps and steps and skips and varying rhythms, but in order to make up for the complexity of the first two bars, it makes it easier by just repeating it for you with different notes, right? So that the rhythm gets straight in your brain, and the general contour gets drilled in your brain. We'll talk more about how you can create melodies using motive manipulation, like we just did. Although this is technically working backwards, right? Because we deconstructed the melody and then reconstructed it. But for now, let's move on to harmonic identity. So here's an idea, a harmonic idea. It's So it's two major chords and it's just going down a minor third. And it's on the shorter side. And I know we said like if it's too short, then it's probably not going to be as memorable because it's too common. But I think you can take a bit of leniency when talking about harmonic identity because you get an equal amount of information just presented in a different way, right? So melodic ideas are big lengthwise, right? And harmonic ideas, they make up for what they don't have in length in width, right? The density of notes inside of a single beat. I don't know if that makes sense, but you get what I'm trying to say, right? Like instead of writing it out like whereas that would have been a melodic idea, we're just compressing that into two vertical chords. Anyways, it also helps that it's not diatonic, right? Because it's you got the G and the G sharp, so it's not gonna be diatonic. It's gonna be chromatic. So that's gonna stick out too. But again, this is just a harmonic identity idea, and so with only one identity, harmonic identity. So it's still not a memorable motive just yet. So why don't we create a rhythmic idea to add on to it? All right, there we go. So again, it's on the shorter side, but what we make up for the fact that it's short by not repeating any rhythmic values. So it's just 16th, half, quarter, and it has values from both sides of the spectrum, slow and fast. So what happens if we combine these two to create a motive with two identities, right? A good motive. So I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to keep the first two notes the same and then change the last one to be E major. Now what do we have? Sound familiar? It's from Star Wars. Yeah. It's I don't know what part it is, but you know, it's like towards the middle of it. But it's not the full thing, right? It's only a fragment. But let's do the same thing we did with the Raiders theme. Let's copy this over one more time. Let's copy over one more time, and then this time let's go up a minor third, and then let's get rid of this, and let's actually do this. And let's actually extend this, and we'll do this again. Copy that over. Let's change the values a bit. like that. Now let's hear what this sounds like. Now there's that full idea from the main theme in Star Wars. So what do we actually have here? So we have the motive, repeat it again, up a minor third, but only a part of it, and then some extra new stuff here, and then the original harmonic identity idea, but it's rhythmically altered. So now let's talk about this in terms of the three identities, right? So we talked about harmonic, and actually, not only is it the going the minor third down, but it's also the fact that every chord is a major chord, right? Every chord. G major, E major, G major, E major, B flat major, A major, B flat major, A major, G major, E major, right? So we're keeping a consistent major sounding harmonies. So that's part of the harmonic identity to this phrase. Now let's talk about rhythmic identity. So we have the initial da-dum, bump, repeat it again, ba-dum, and then we have a new one right here. Bum, ba-da-dum, bum. That's a new rhythmic idea. That's new and unique, right? It's not just bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum. It's specifically ending on the upbeat, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, right? So that's what makes it interesting. Now let's talk about it in terms of melodic idea. So it is technically a harmonic idea, but it also could be a melodic idea if you just focus on the top notes, right? So if we just look at the top notes, the ones colored in blue, we have repeat, third, down, third up, repeat, third down, and then a tritone up, repeat, steps, step down, step down, and then third down, right? So we have, it does oscillate a bit, but it's specifically oscillating minor third and then oscillating, so oscillating minor thirds and then oscillating stepwise motion stuff. So it's somewhat unique in that sense. Plus you have the tritone, which is always going to stick out. So now that we have covered the three identities, we can use them to break down or fragment a melody to create manipulatable motives. Because what we did right now was technically we did break it down, or I broke it down first and then combined it to show you the different techniques. But now let's try and do it the other way around. See if we can identify what could possibly be used as motives from a larger melody, a longer melody. All right, so here we have row, row, row your boat. Now, this whole thing would be the melody. It's the phrase, the 4-bar phrase. So if we fragment it, we can create some motives that we can use. So let's see. Let's do 2 and 2. What do we get? Do these have any unique identities? Well, it's varying rhythmic values, right? So it has rhythmic identity. Does it have harmonic? Well, it's a melody, so it's not probably going to not apply here. Let's check for melodic identity. It's repeated, step up, and then down, up, up. So there's no leaps or skips, but it does go up, or up, down, up, right? So it has somewhat of a unique contour to it. But I think using them together in some way is probably going to work best. Having both identities be present all the time instead of removing one idea. So if you just heard that, you probably wouldn't associate this. You probably wouldn't associate that immediately with row your boat because it's too there's not enough varying qualities to it. Let's look at the last half. The last half is a bit weaker since it is just a arpeggiation down and a scale motion down, and it's actually going to be even weaker if we broke it down as 1-bar fragments. But this one will still kind of work. Again, it'll be weak if you remove one of the identities and just reduced it down to like just its rhythmic identity or just its melodic identity. But that all that means is that we just need to make sure that both identities are kept whenever we're manipulating them. So what's a way we can manipulate it? Say you want to create like a big pedal 5, you know? So here's something we could do. Let's just do this for now. Let's take this 2-bar phrase, paste it over here. Now, since we're going to do a big 5, let's diatonically transpose this to a 5. So remember, when we diatonically transpose this, we still kept the rhythmic identity and we still kept the melodic identity because the sequence of intervals still stay the same and the sequence of rhythmic values still stay the same. Now, let's copy this over and let's chromatically transpose it up a minor second. Now we're in A flat major. Let's do it one more time in A. And let's do it one more time in B. Actually, let's do B but diatonic. So it's going to be like a B diminished, but that B diminished over the G is going to form a G7 chord, right? We can get rid of this last one, extra bar. And let's add a forte here. Let's crescendo this entire thing. Let's copy that dynamic here. Let's take this, let's add it to the timpani. And let's go ahead and add it here. And next chord is A flat major. Next chord is A major. Next chord is B minor or B dim. And actually, let's take this so that the note is down. Yeah, so it's in second inversion. All right, let's see how this sounds. All right, and that could lead to a big 1. And it's at this point that you would use the full melody. And we'll worry about that later. So that's one way you could use the fragment, right? Now, what if you wanted to use the 1-bar fragment? Well, we can do that too. So something's missing, right? There's that now that gap is like begging for something. So let's take a different fragment. And of course, we can diatonically transpose so it fits. Again, up a half step, up another half step to A major, and then up another half step. Go up another one to make it B, but make it diatonic. Okay, now let's move this down here, actually. I don't know why I did it in all in one voice. Actually, let's put it in woodwinds. I don't have piccolo, do I? Let's just do that for now, see what happens. Piano, crescendo to forte. Let's hear this. Yeah, right? Let's add one more thing. So for this last bar, why don't we add this? Bum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And actually, just to give you an example of why we can't, in this case, remove one of the identities, let's try going up to a C. So what we're trying to do here is basically say, hey, why don't we use this as a motive? Because we're breaking it down even more than in 1 bar and doing half a bar. But the problem with that is if you took away the melodic identity and just kept the rhythmic identity, which basically means just changing the sequence of intervals, at that point you can't distinguish it from, or you can't distinguish where it came from. But that's okay, because you don't need to sometimes, right? The main thing to get out of this is that what we did here was create a dramatic build up, and it's not very dramatic, but kind of. Without the important thing is that we built it without using the entire melody, right? And being able to identify motivic material within the melodies you create, you can write more new material in your piece without having to repeat the entire melody each time you want to do something interesting, right? What makes it more interesting, right, is when you have these fragments that make the listener go, "Hey, I remember this, but I don't I don't remember this. Why does it sound so familiar?" It's like causing the listener to be always engaging with the music, right? Not tuning it out. Plus, from a composition side, it saves time when you're writing. Instead of having to be like, I need to create a whole 8 bars of new material. No, you just need to take the material you already have, break it up a bit, and put the puzzle pieces together in different ways. And that's a lot more efficient than having to come up with new material. I mean, it's still new material, right? But it's old material disguised as new material. I think that's the best way to put it. So yeah, so the takeaway is that a motive needs to be unique, and if it's unique, it's memorable. And memorability comes from three identities: melodic identity, harmonic identity, and rhythmic identity. And melodic is intervals, a sequence of intervals. Harmonic is a sequence of chords, and rhythmic is a sequence of varying rhythms. And we took some time to try and identify what could be used as motivic material. We tried to fragmenting a little melody to use as motivic material. And doing this example, we did end up doing a couple of motive manipulation methods, but we'll cover them more in detail in future videos. For the next video, we're going to talk more about what we did earlier, how we kind of were like, hey, so what if you take this motivic idea, copy and paste it, and then move it up a third? And that was the melody to the Raiders theme, stuff like that. In the next video, we'll talk about how we can construct a melody, basically how to make melodies, but specifically how to make them using these motive manipulation techniques. So I hope this was somewhat helpful. I know I'm not the best speaker, and it took many, many tries to do this. I remember the reason I first started doing this was because someone asked about how I write, and I told them I promised that I would like do a video on the little tips and tricks that I have for writing. That was back in January, I think. And I did record a video then, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like the way I said stuff. It was all not very concise. And then I did another one yesterday, and I thought it was okay, but then I was like, I could do it better. So then before I started recording this one, I actually this time decided to write out like an essay version, just so I can get all my thoughts out. So hopefully it's a bit more clear, and hopefully I conveyed this information decently. Thank you for sticking around, and I will see you in part 2.